Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Innovations in International Symposium. My name is Nageeb Sumar, and I'm Vice President at Fidelity Charitable. We're here to talk about the topic of advocacy, and I'm delighted that we have Suzanne Granville from the One Campaign to join us and provide her deep insight and expertise. Welcome, Suzanne.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you. It's really nice to join you and to talk about my favorite subject.
Awesome. You know, it's funny, Suzanne, when I was talking to my wife yesterday about this issue and topic on advocacy, she said, you know, if anybody needs to know about advocacy, they should just turn to their teenage daughters or sons, you know, who advocate for tech or they advocate for extended curfew. Do you really need to have a topic on advocacy? I said, it's a little bit more sophisticated than that in the international sphere, but we're delighted to have you join us. I'm sure you can relate as well to my wife's comment.
I can. I have 4 of my own. And also in the One Campaign, we've had leaders who have been in high school. So we do tap into that age group and their specific skill set.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, just for the benefit of the audience, I just provide some quick background on Suzanne. She is acting executive director for North America for the One Campaign. And she has had extensive background in government relations and grassroots campaigns. With the AFL-CIO, the National Association of Letter Carriers, and the Americans United for Change before she came to One. So deep, deep experience in this topic of advocacy, and that's why we thought she would be the perfect person to help spotlight and provide insight on the issue. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Suzanne, it would be great to just hear a little bit about the One Campaign, and maybe if you could provide some background on the One Campaign and how you work, what issues you work on, just to set the context before we jump into some conversations about advocacy specifically.
Sure. So the One Campaign is a global advocacy organization working to end extreme poverty and preventable disease, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. We've been around since 2004, so this was our 17th year. So in advocacy space, we're still kind of relatively young. And I thought I'd share this graphic here to kind of talk a little bit about our theory of change and how we do our work. So we have a hipper, younger sister organization, Product Red. You may know of them. They leverage donations to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria with private sector partners. We work strictly in advocacy. And that means we work very hard to make sure that policies that can help alleviate and extreme poverty and preventable disease have a voice among citizens. We have members, supporters all around the world, and we have offices in Ottawa, Washington, D.C., Brussels, Paris, London, Berlin, Abuja, and Johannesburg. So how we do this is we like to talk about, if you're following along to the right of the we come together, we build an arsenal. And we basically have what we call our 5 Ps plus 1, which is we always try and start with the best policy. We try and have our policy be fact-based, well-vetted, and a policy that's doable, that's campaignable, and that can bring both sides of the aisle. Here in the United States, there's multi-parties in other countries together. And that gets to the second point. We use smart political advocacy. And we can't do that very well without an engaged public. So we work really hard to bring citizen activists in to talk about our issues, to engage with decision makers. And we also leverage popular voices. That might be artists, authors, former elected officials, musicians, YouTube and Instagram influencers, all kinds of voices who have audiences that they can bring along with us and help publicize our message.
Mm-hmm.
And then we work with diverse partnerships. It's very hard when we bring a delegation into a congressional office or parliamentary office to kind of pinpoint what the typical one supporter looks like or thinks or feels, other than they want to work to end extreme poverty and diseases like AIDS. So we try and recruit people of all ideologies, different walks of life. As I said, ages, we've had high school students, we have retirees, and it makes an impact. It really, for elected officials and others, they look and they see the breadth of their community and they see a broader coalition of people who support these issues. And then we also like to bring along some fresh and compelling messages. We understand that the way to reach new supporters, the way to influence elected officials is to be in the media, to be on social media, to help bring your case. And hopefully all that pressures the people in power, using policymakers, using those influencers to get to deliver more money, just a better and more robust kind of foreign aid, better policies that look creatively at what the challenges are, and empowered citizens. And we see empowered citizens, I'm coming back to that as a strategy. It's really important for elected officials to hear from their constituents. And we, I got into this work, I can still remember my light bulb moment where I understood the power of this. Because when you engage citizens and they engage on a campaign and they go to visit their lawmakers, they write a letter, they get a response, that empowers them and that changes them. And so it's almost bigger than the issue you're fighting for in that moment. And that's what got me hooked on this work. You realize they're going to carry that forward in other things they do. Maybe those high school students go home and have a better conversation with their parent. Or maybe they decide to leave one and get a nicer playground in their neighborhood or get the pothole fixed and everything in between. And we think that's an important legacy for our organization, whether it's on our issues or not. We hope that people carry those skills and experiences out in the world.
No, thanks, Suzanne. It's a great overview, and I think the slide really exemplifies what's a pretty sophisticated strategy, but boils it down into a digestible way for us to understand how you actually conduct your work. And I love what you talked about, building diverse coalitions, and also about how once you create an advocate, you may create an advocate for life across multiple issues. The audience that are probably watching this are mostly oriented towards international issues. And so to just bring to light beyond what you just described, kind of having a robust foreign aid budget, I'd love for you to describe a little bit about what specific issues does one focus on within the international development sphere, and has it focused exclusively on COVID and vaccines, given where we're at in the world, or is it much beyond that?
So we started out really as a response to the AIDS pandemic in Africa. So our roots are in a bunch of diseases that were taxing the continent, the countries there, the people, and we knew how to treat them. We were treating them here. We were treating them everywhere else. And in even before one was one, most of the people in the founding of the organization were involved in debt relief around the millennium. And that got debt forgiveness, and it was put towards health and education. And so while we still would like to get as many people as we can pushed above that $1.90 a day, which is the definition of extreme poverty, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And so when I was talking about those better policies, one of the things we look at is how you create economic opportunity, because you will not lift people entirely out of poverty with an aid program, but with economic opportunity. So you did pinpoint what we're doing all day for the past 18 months, which is largely working on COVID. It really puts at risk all the achievements we've had. I'm sure everybody on this call is feeling that the programs they fund are all in jeopardy with this pandemic. So we've got to work to end that. We've got to get vaccines to the people who need them most. So that's really, really what we're focusing on. But we're also trying to work because someday we will come out of this pandemic and we're going to have to make up a lot of ground. So one of the things we're excited going forward that we'll be working on is an African jobs initiative, seeking investment and the creation of good jobs, possibly, hopefully sustainable jobs that help mitigate climate damage too. So while we're not a climate organization, we're looking at those things and trying to figure out ways that we can intersect. We're always interested in agriculture as a really good economic boost for a family, first of all. But when agriculture flourishes and more people are interested in agriculture and governments are investing in agriculture, families are feeding themselves better, their health improves, the health of the community economically as well improves. So that's great. That's the agenda right now.
Well, it's ambitious agenda, and we applaud you on the international side for carrying that forward on behalf of all of us. Suzanne, I think when you said some of what you really enjoy about the job is building those coalitions, particularly of engaged citizens, I wanted to ask you, since we're talking in the spirit of this international work, some people say that it's harder to mobilize constituent voice and support around international issues than domestic ones. Maybe the people feel less proximate to that work. Maybe they feel as though it's harder to measure success for whatever reason. How would you help dispel that notion if that's what some people might think?
Yeah, I think it is. Look, when we were founded, the issue of the AIDS pandemic in Africa, it was on the front page of news magazines, newspapers were covering it. You saw it on the news at night. There was the Ethiopian famine. It was very much in the mind of people, and that's less so. We're a little bit of a victim of our own success, is because we've saved more lives, fewer kids under the age of 5 are dying. There's economic opportunity that's visible. I think people think it's done in a way, right?
Right.
Didn't we fix AIDS in Africa? I thought that's done.
Right.
So you do have to do that awareness raising, and you do have to reach out to people. Now, the good news is that there are people who are still interested in it or remember it. And do want to engage in those issues. And I think COVID really reminded people again of the commonality of all of us. That there's, viruses don't respect borders, and economic opportunity will flourish there. It'll flourish everywhere. It'll help all of us to have trading partners and commerce across countries in Africa. The population of African countries is very young. We call it the demographic dividend. There's a great future ahead, but we do have to continue to tackle some of these problems. But we also don't feel like we have to be the biggest. We just have to be effective. And so that's where we've leaned in to be targeted about, the important decisions. Start with the important decision makers, and engage real people, which is something a lot of organizations aren't doing anymore. And it's really a different experience for a member of Congress to have a constituent walk in and say, I care about this issue. I'd like you to read this. I'd like to talk to you about it. to
Right.
see letters to the editor in the paper, to get a handwritten, and I mean even like type it, email, but more a customized letter about an
Yep.
issue. And for people who are donors, you're at a different level of expertise and connection in the community. And I think that could be a really valuable way to multiply
Yep.
the other work that you do.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. And we're talking to a global audience here, but one of the things that the One campaign has drummed into me, at least when they do surveys of US citizens, is, some people think that we spend upwards of 20% of our budget in the US on foreign aid when it's less than 1% of the budget. So when you ask them how much we should spend, they say, closer to 5 or 10%, right? So I think just based on that fact, sometimes you build a natural constituency of people that want to empathize with the rest of the world and give more. So Suzanne, I want to pull on the thread that you just described. I think a lot in the audience have some donors that are here. Some may be new to thinking about advocacy and integrating that into their work. They either may not use their own voice as donors, or they may feel uncomfortable supporting nonprofits that do advocacy because they think that the nonprofits should focus on programmatic work, or that there's a very fine line between advocacy and lobbying that nonprofits can do. So could you speak to kind of two things? One, what's the donor's role? You have an issue that you're very passionate about in the international sphere. What's the role that the donor can do? And what's the role that they can do in support of nonprofits as they think about advocacy in the international sphere?
Yeah, it's really important. And I don't think we should ever look at ourselves as in competition. So we are a nonprofit, we're a 501c3, we have a C4 arm, but we were founded to do awareness raising and advocacy. That was the purpose, was groups. And I think, you might have been there at that time trying to figure out how you had a good citizen voice in support of international development. And we should be talking. It's really helpful for me to know donor organizations and the programmatic work they're doing. It brings to life, what's going on and the good news that's happening and the progress we're making. So first of all, I'd say anybody who's interested in dipping their toe in the water on advocacy, obviously you should talk to your legal counsel and find out what works within your kind of governance structure. And also just, finding a way for it to match up with the mission, vision, and values of what you do. But there is room within a 501c3 to spend money even on direct lobbying. So having people who go in and talk to congressional offices, to talk to elected officials. I think it's a really important role and multiplier. And figuring out the line of, when you're sharing information and not actually advocating for passage of the bill is also where there's a lot of room for moving the dial. Because I'll go back to the thing you just talked about, the 1% of the budget. So a lot of people don't know that figure. They always think it's in the 25%. But when you pair that with what's being accomplished and where you see partnerships between, local governments and local partners on the ground and funders here and governments here, and how that working together, the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. And those parts are all important. And at the core of advocacy is really storytelling. And I'm going to guess everyone on this call has thought about storytelling, done training on storytelling, or you're already a gifted storyteller. And that's really what is helpful in advocacy, is telling that story, not just of the good things that are going on, the opportunities we have paired with the challenges for, doing development work, but also just why you care. There's nothing more important to me than when we have nurses who are support activists and supporters with One talking about their experience on COVID wards.
Right.
When we were advocating to get more funding directed to energy projects in Africa. You know, we had business owners who were saying, we had a guy who owned a restaurant, a cafe, and he said, if I didn't have reliable electricity, I'd be losing my inventory once a week. I can't imagine trying to do a business that way. And they bring a point of view and a solidarity that's really important. So I think people also get really hung up on, oh, I have to know all the facts. I have to be an expert on the issue. And that's fine to be an expert.
Right.
But it's that storytelling that moves the needle when citizens go in, when citizens write a letter. That's what makes a difference.
Yeah. I think that's a great takeaway, Suzanne, as we come up kind of close to time here on, talking about how to have folks in the audience really activate themselves. You know, everybody's a storyteller. We all can refine our stories. But I think if it's a story that comes from the heart and is informed by the data that you described and by the lived experiences that we're all going through with COVID, I think it makes it a lot more popular and a lot more resonant with, you know, people that you are trying to engage with and influence. So I think we're close to time, but I think we've only teased probably what we're what we can do in the advocacy space. I think organizations like the One Campaign exist to be able to help facilitate advocacy on the international side. And I think your team, you know, has been and continues to be a wonderful resource to all that are in the international development sphere around kind of advocating for international development and international issues writ large. Any last closing comments from you, Suzanne, before we wrap up?
No, I would just say a lot of people are afraid of advocacy, so I'll just put a finer point on that.
Yeah.
Either because they're concerned about legal considerations or they're figuring out, they're thinking that it takes some miraculous skill that you've not yet developed. But I would say to think about it, you're welcome to join us at one. If you want to learn more, attend one of our trainings, figure out, you know, what a good takeaway there is for your organization. But yeah, it's pretty hard to fail if you go in with the heart and the interest and the passion about the issues you already care about, and just pick up the phone or write a letter to the editor and weigh in and see how it goes. Yeah.
Awesome. Small actions to take that we all can take as engaged citizens. Suzanne, thanks so much for your time. Wonderful to chat with you. Look forward to an engaging discussion for those of us that can join us later, and look forward to seeing One's continued success in the international sphere. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
All right. Take care.